Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and it is time to grade out all 32 teams from the real-life 2024 NFL Draft after all the mocks for one-round mocks, seven-round mocks, three-round mocks, predictive mocks, my guy mocks. It's finally over, and now we get to play armchair quarterback on all 32 teams in the NFL. Make sure to like this video. It helps with the algorithm. Make sure to leave a comment in the comment section below. But who your favorite pick was in this NFL draft, who had your favorite draft out of all the teams, and who had your least favorite of all the teams. We're going to really break them down right now. Don't want to keep you guys here too long. Going to put some chapters in there to let you guys fly through this a little bit faster, but let's get to it. These are my grades. Every individual player, we're going to talk about the rules that I had in grading everyone. You know, I had some point system going here. It wasn't all just arbitrary. Let's get to it. Thanks for coming. Hurry up. Oh my God, let's go. So just a quick overlay of how I'm grading it. I'm looking at the fit, the need, the value, and their class as a whole. That comes with like rounding up the grades, because if I find a pick to be an A, I grade it 100, B 85, C 70, D 55, and F gets a total of 40. The total grade you'll see at the end is the average of all the players picked. So, and there were no draft day player trades of any significance. So, you know, not like there was like an A.J. Brown trade or anything like that. So let's get started with the Arizona Cardinals. And I gave their overall class a B. I really like the first four picks that they had. The Trey Benson pick, I like it, but I feel like their running back room to me is a lot better than people think. So I didn't really see the need for them to go and get a running back. I certainly didn't like what they did following that with those three picks. I think they could have gotten a lot better players than what they got at those positions. The Xavier Thomas pick, I think, was sneaky good. Christian Jones, the offensive tackle at Texas, he was like a 4 or 5 year starter at left tackle. I think that's a really good guy to have in place. I think he could be somebody who could be that late round offensive lineman that turns out to be a regular starter. Darius Robinson gets a B just because I felt like they could have maybe done a little bit better. You know, Darius Robinson wasn't my top guy in there, but they made up for it with Max Melton. Give that an A grade. And then I think they did a good job filling in some of the like special teams needs there at the end, so you're not really going to punish them for those picks. Up next is the Atlanta Falcons, and they get a C+. Michael Penix, that pick gets a D, I think for the obvious reasons. That has nothing to do with Michael Penix. It has to do with, you know, why are they picking Michael Penix at 8? I understand there was the rumor that teams were trying to trade up, and I guess they really loved him. But you just gave Kirk Cousins $180 million. I think this could have waited. I think they could have done something much more effective with it. I think Rome Odunze would have been a much better pick for them. Even if they traded back and went with a defensive player, I think that would have been a good idea too. Ruka Horohoro, again, sort of like the same thing with Michael Penix. I like him as a player, but way too early for me, and especially with some of the other guys that were on the board as well. You know, like Johnny Newton. Had they gone J.J. McCarthy and Johnny Newton, those probably would have been both Bs, and that would have drastically changed the overall grade. Braylon Trice and Brandon Dorlus, though, I really like those picks. Braylon Trice kind of fell down people's boards. Brandon Dorlus is sort of that early down edge, can be kicked inside. I like the way that he'll sort of hopefully be used. The potential there, I think, is high. Jace McClellan, I gave that a D just because why are you taking running backs? That's the one thing Atlanta didn't need. I think you could have been more effective, taking something that would have been more effective for your team as a whole. So overall, it gets a C+ grade. Up next is the Carolina Panthers. They get a B+. Their best pick to me was, in terms of overall grade, was Jatavion Sanders at 101. They've been looking for a tight end for a long time now, ever since Greg Olsen left. I think Jatavion Sanders, even though he didn't really impress at his workouts of the combine, which is why he fell to 101, I still think the value is really great. I like Xavier Legette. I think they could have done maybe a little bit better with that pick. Again, I think Had they picked an edge player, I would have been a lot happier than taking your current wide receiver 3, future wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 maybe, depending on what Deontay Johnson looks like there. Same thing with Jonathan Brooks and Trayvon Wallace. Jonathan Brooks might be the best running back, but you already are loaded at running back. I guess with the Miles Sanders experiment, like I said it would, has failed. Maybe that's the spot that he takes once he's 100% healthy. Trayvon Wallace, I like them to go linebacker. I just think there was better linebackers available. There are other picks, I think, in terms of depth and special teams help, I think they did a good job. But I think it's, considering the position they were in, I think B+ was sort of the best case scenario for them anyway, because they weren't really in a position to do a whole lot. But I am concerned about what that pass rush is going to look like off the edges. The fact that they didn't add a single player in this draft that does that. And to the contrary of what we just saw, the Chicago Bears ironically get an A+, and the pick they got from Carolina obviously gets an A. It's your franchise quarterback. Rome Odunze gets an A. That's your future wide receiver 1 or 2. You're going to be in a situation with him and DJ Moore where it's going to be 1A, 1B. For as long as Keenan Allen's around, it's 1A, 1B, and 1C. So Caleb Williams is being completely set up to succeed here. Kieran Emagedeji, I like that pick, especially because the Braxton Jones situation, apparently at left tackle, they're not all the way sold with. So it brings in some competition there, and you're going to be playing the very best option at left tackle between the players that you have. Torrey Taylor, the punter, I give it a C just because your team's not good enough to be doing this. Unfortunately, I don't care about the moves they made, the draft picks they made earlier. At 122, they could have been so much more effective in adding more talent there. I just think that this was unnecessary. I do love them trading back into the draft using a pick from next year to get Austin Booker at 144. Booker is one of those guys where if he stayed in school, he probably would have guaranteed himself to be a top 50 pick in the draft. That's why I like that they traded a pick from next year, because they're sort of punting that pick next year to get him a year early, to sort of work with him and hopefully build him up so he might be even better than what would be considered a top 50 prospect next year, with the amount of development he'll have going into next offseason. So this could be a guy that you put opposite of Montez Sweat, which does help the grade of a Kieran Emagedeji and even of a Torrey Taylor by going and doing this. Up next, the Dallas Cowboys. They get a B grade overall. I really like the Cooper Beebe pick, and I love the Kalen Carson pick. What they did with Marshawn Kneeland, again, I don't hate him as a player. I just don't understand why they picked him. He's like defensive end 5 on this roster right now. I just don't understand it. They did draft 2 starting offensive linemen. I don't know who's playing center. I don't know if that's still an open spot. It might still be. But, you assume Cooper Beebe plays left tackle. Tyler Smith goes to left tackle. Cooper Beebe plays left guard. Tyler Smith moves to left tackle. Tyler Guyton plays right tackle. Terrence Steele sort of becomes your swing tackle there. And then Zach Martin's your right guard. I think that could be what the future of this team looks like up front for the offensive line. So that is that. Maurice Luafu, he gets a C only because of the need. There were so many better linebackers available, in my opinion, there. So that grade doesn't get a whole lot of love, despite it filling, I think, a pretty important need on the team. And then I think they did a good job, with some depth players there. Got some depth in the trenches for the offensive and defensive line. Picked up a depth receiver, probably get some special teams work. They could have done better. But overall they still get a pretty decent grade because they did land on some pretty important aspects. Here's the Detroit Lions, and they get an A grade. Just short of an A+, just because of that Giovanni Manu pick at 126. Despite him being Canadian, whoop whoop. I don't get it. They could have done so much better. They could have gotten an impact player rather than a guy who at best is probably going to be your 4th or 5th tackle on the roster, might not even make the team. They did counter that with Christian Mahogany there at 201, who I think is going to be an extremely effective interior offensive lineman, especially because they got the 1-year rental on Kevin Zeitler. It allows Mahogany to sort of develop behind there with not a lot of pressure on him. Getting Terry and Arnold and Enos Rekestra, just home runs there. They had a cornerback need coming in. Cameron Sutton made a quarterback need even more obvious. So now you've really got to put yourself in a position where you might have two really stud corners who at some point during this draft cycle were both looked at as first-round picks, and Rekestra falling. Them being able to land him is really great. Mekhi Wingo, they got him a lot later than I think maybe people thought, maybe 50 picks later than people expected. Now, had they gone Wingo at 126, Mahogany at 189, and gotten Manu at 201, this probably bumps it to an A+ grade. It's just them being wasteful, I feel, at 126 is a real problem for me. It's the Green Bay Packers next. They get a B-. They were so hot and cold in this draft for me. You know, they got Edgerrin Cooper and Javon Bullard, who are both going to be starters for them. I think day one, Edgerrin Cooper is going to be that 3-down inside linebacker they've been looking for to help out in all aspects of the game. Javon Bullard's going to play next to Xavier McKinney, come up, play some slot as well. Kalen King, I think, is a giant steal. He was looked at one point at this time last year. He was looked at as a top 20 pick in this draft. Fell out of favor with a lot of people, but I love that pickup. I like the Michael Pratt pick for him to be the long-term backup there. He was really looked at as, you know, they had that range of guys who they thought were going to be starters, and then it was really him and Spencer Rattler that their people were going back and forth on. And for him to go at 245, that's pretty crazy. I don't love the Jordan Morgan pick. I didn't think tackle was a problem. Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom are perfectly good tackles. I feel like they needed a guard. And, I mean, considering what they did at pick 91 with Tyron Hopper, I mean, I understand getting another linebacker, but there are way better linebackers available. If that's what you're going to do with 91, I would have traded 91 and 25, trying to get ahead of Pittsburgh and have taken Troy Fountain and had him be the right tackle on this team. And then you would have had a real star offensive line there. Even try and maybe moved up a bit to go center because you went Marshawn Lloyd at 88. Package 88 and 91, could have maybe moved up and gotten yourself Zach Frazier, again, leap in front of Pittsburgh and getting yourself a starting center. I think that there was so many better possibilities for them in certain aspects of this draft. So again, very hot and cold. Them taking 3 safeties. You know, Evan Williams, okay, you take another safety for some depth there. They do need the depth. But then to go Ketan Oladapo at 169, it's like, all right, relax. You guys got other things you guys got to focus on here. Rather than just trying to take guys who play special teams maybe. Up next is the LA Rams, and they did really well. They did really, really well. Specifically in their front four, they added 3 guys to their front four of the defensive line that I think could all be starters at the beginning of the year. Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, and Tyler Davis. You know, you're looking at, if they're running that 3-4, their front 3 could very well be Tyler Davis, at nose tackle. Braden Fisk could be like a 3-4 defensive end almost, with Kobe Turner turning up as the 3 technique in that Aaron Donald spot, with Jared Verse then pass rushing there. It's just a great little group. I really like Bo Limmer. That could be a guy who could end up being the starting center week 1 if Steve Avila, they feel they want to keep him at guard perhaps. If not, I think he could play guard as well. I think it's just overall a really good pick late in this draft. Blake Corum, I like that pick as well. Not as much for the Rams. I do think that they needed some sort of like workhorse style back behind Kyren Williams, especially with Kyren Williams' injury history. He was great. I do expect him to be a top 5 running back in the league coming into this season. But there is that 1-year wonder thing hanging over his head. There is the injury concerns hanging over his head. So to add a guy like Blake Corum in there, I think it could be a really good situation for them overall as the offense. Might not do any favors for Kyren Williams fantasy-wise, but it does lift the whole offense up. They got some C picks in there. They took a kicker. Like, come on. Stop taking... Okay, fine, you took a kicker. Cameron Kinchins, I mean, if you wanted slow safeties, I guess that's a thing. I guess they kind of needed to work in the secondary anyway, though. Brennan Jackson, didn't love it at 154. They could have done way better in that aspect as well for a wide receiver. And up next is Minnesota. They get an A-. Their first 3 picks are home runs. J.J. McCarthy was my quarterback too. That's an A. And him going into that situation on top of that, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, that offensive line, those 2 tackles, like probably the best tackle combination in the whole league. He's going into a situation that's going to be hard for him to fail in. So put your money down for Offensive Rookie of the Year right there, J.J. McCarthy. Dallas Turner, probably the best edge rusher in the draft, getting him at 17. That's an A pick as well. They get Kyrie Jackson, a sneaky good corner at 108. Walter Roos, who could be like that 6th offensive lineman, back, your 3rd tackle, maybe can even, get in there, play some guard if you need him to. That's a B pick. And then, they filled it out on the interior of the offensive and defensive line there. I don't like the kicker pick. Again, that's a C. But picking those guys in the 200s does help the grade a bit. But overall, Minnesota Vikings fans, this NFC North really, in about a year and a half, really picked it up and has become one of the better divisions in the entire league. Here's the New Orleans Saints. They get a B+. First 2 picks, home runs. Talisi Fuaga is going to start day 1. Kool-Aid McKinstry at 41. Great pickup for them there. Spencer Rattler at 150. That's a good spot to get him at. I think this was really his floor, is to go in this position here. You let him work behind Derek Carr, and you got a backup quarterback there. That could end up being a long-term starter. He was at one point looked at as the number 1 quarterback prospect, the number 1 prospect in college football in general. It's just the maturity thing, and apparently those maturity issues are what hurt him in this draft stock, despite South Carolina vouching for him. I guess what happened in Oklahoma does still stand out. And then they just really filled out some special teams help there and some offensive line, defensive line depth, which I think is always important. It's hard to crap on that. That type of strategy. You can never have too many offensive linemen and defensive linemen to help your team out in these injury situations, especially with New Orleans with having so many injuries on the offensive line in particular. So here's my New York Giants, and they get an A-. The Malik Neighbors pick, fantastic. The Tyler Nubin pick at 47, the best safety in the draft at 47, that's an A. That has like Xavier McKinney type vibes to it when they took McKinney as the first safety off the board the year that he was drafted. It's sort of the same thing. He's going to come in and be that replacement for him long term. Andrew Phillips fills a need. We'll see how that works out. We'll see how he fits. I think it's still a good pick. It was the right position to pick at, I will say that. And the same thing with Theo Johnson. It was the right pick to make. When you're looking at the board, you're looking at the needs of the team. The best player on the board, maybe not. But, close enough where it doesn't just become, like a what are you doing solely picking for needs situation. Tyrone Tracy, that gets a C for me just because, I felt they could have done better for the running back room. I guess they're confident with the running back room they have right now, which I don't blame them for. I think that, having a platoon rather than one star has really been the plan for this coaching staff all along. And then Darius Muasau, he's going to be like more of a special teams guy from the looks of it. And here are the Philadelphia Eagles, and to quote Micah Parsons, I hate them. They always get the best players. They get an A grade. Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, they got cornerback 1 and potentially even cornerback 2 in this draft at 22 and 40. Just unbelievable. Just great work by them. Then you got Jalix Hunt, who I give a B grade. I think that was a good pick for them in a good spot. Will Shipley, good pick in a good spot. The best pick, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. at 155. There was one point where I had them picking him in the first round, and then I had them picking him in the second round, and then I had them picking him in the third round. And the fact they got him at 155, him and Nakobe Dean are going to be your starting linebackers. I think Jeremiah Trotter might end up being the best linebacker on the team within the year. They even went and got Johnny Wilson, who's a different type of wide receiver. You know, he'll help with, you know, those jump ball situations in the red zone. That's a great pickup. Dylan McMahon was even a good pick as sort of your fourth interior offensive lineman now. They just never screw up drafts, it seems, anymore. They never do. Ever since Jalen Reagor, they just haven't screwed anything up, it seems. But one team that can't help but seemingly screw everything up is the San Francisco 49ers. They get a B- draft. Really, it got saved by the picks of Dominic Puny and Malik Mustafa. Puny's probably going to be a day one starter by just talent-wise alone on that offensive line. Malik Mustafa, I think, is a good third safety to start the year. He could be like Talif, like Fuanga, in that by the end of his first year, he could probably end up working his way into the starting lineup. The Renardo Green pick at 64, I think, is god-awful. That was such a reach. Even Ricky Pearsall, a huge reach for them. For him to have been that pick when you had Adonai Mitchell, you had Malachi Corley, you had Xavier Legette, you had so many other options out there. I knew the 49ers, if you guys went back and watched my the first round mock draft I dropped the morning of the draft, I thought the 49ers would be the team that would pick the guy that shouldn't have been in the first round. And up until that point, pretty much everyone that had been picked, it was like, yeah, I can see that guy being in the first round. I could see it. And then Ricky Pearsall goes, I was like, that was the pick. I had it being Christian Haynes, personally, just because of the interior offensive line. It would have fit their system. But I knew that they would be the team that would do this. So I pretty much had it locked in that their first round pick was going to be, you know, a reach. Even though, you know, with Christian Haynes, I think he's a really good player. I think him going in the first round would have been ridiculously early. But overall, it's just they couldn't help themselves. Here's the Seattle Seahawks. I give them a B+. They took Christian Haynes in the perfect spot. You know, I mocked him to go 31 to the 49ers. He goes 81 here. He's going to be a day one starter at guard for Seattle, and they picked him at 81. That's an A pick. Byron Murphy, he gets an A pick as well because they got him at 16. I think he could have been top 10. I think this was a good spot to pick him up. It is interesting how they're going to work that interior defensive line, but they also just needed guys who could get after the passer no matter where they were lining up. Knight and Barner, don't really like those picks all that much. I like Pritchett and DJ James at 136 and 192. I like that they're pretty much drafting those guys. Took two swings at that position to try and just find another guy to put out there with Tariq Woolen and Devon Witherspoon. You got Kobe Bryant there. DJ James, Nehemiah Pritchett, could they be safeties? Could Kobe Bryant go and play safety? You working in the best guys in that secondary and just taking two swings at it, I think was really smart because I think Seattle's got a good roster overall. And based upon who was available at the time, I mean, maybe they could have gone Jeremiah Trotter Jr. at 136. But they had gone Tyrese Knight at 118. So, I mean, there is that. But, you know, that's really just sort of splitting hairs at that point. It's still a pretty decent draft. Tampa Bay Buccaneers get an A-. They found two starters in the first two picks. Graham Barton's going to start at center. Chris Braswell is going to be your starting edge. Even Jalen McMillan, he's going to be a guy who's going to slide into probably a number one receiver role as you age out that wide receiver group. Tyke Smith, I think he fits right in there in that safety group. A good pick for that secondary. Bucky Irving, I think, is going to be a really good complement early in the year for Rachaad White. I think he's a sneaky guy to end up being a starter. So maybe if you pick and stash him in your fantasy, I think that could be something that works out really well for you late going into those fantasy football playoffs in particular. And then the focus really was, it seemed to be, let's help Baker Mayfield. They got him another tight end, probably going to be a special teamer, but hey, it's a tight end, a receiving threat. Elijah Klein, an interior offensive lineman, some offensive line depth, two weapons, and then a starting center. I think they did right by the roster building strategy they've seemed to implement this offseason. And here are the Washington Commanders, and they get a B+. They had a really good run here, and I guess it all depends on what you feel about Jaden Daniels, whether or not this is a B+ or an A-. To me, Jaden Daniels is a B at best. They needed the quarterback. They didn't take the best one. So that I can't give it an A. To get Jerzon Newton at 36, that was just a steal of a pick. It also gives them flexibility with Jonathan Allen now, which I think people are sort of not taking into account all that much. Mike Sanistril, I mean, that's your Kendall Fuller replacement right there. Ben Sinnott, that's your starting tight end day one. It's not going to be Zach Ertz. You got Jane Daniels, a starting tight end as well. Brandon Coleman, he's a tackle. He's a guard. I think that's a good swing guy. I think it was just early for him. Luke McCaffrey, I think, is a really sneaky good pick. Come in, be your wide receiver 3. And then, you filled out basically special teams guys the rest of the way out. Nothing to really write home about there. But a good draft for Washington. We're now on to the Baltimore Ravens. They get a B+. Nate Wiggins, Adisa Isaac, Devontae Walker, TJ Tampa, all A picks. Just great value for those guys. Really got them a lot later than they were probably mocked to go. Roger Rosengarten, I knew that he would find his way into being drafted in the first 2 rounds. He could be somebody who could end up being the starting right tackle for Baltimore week 1. Rasheen Ali, Samak, Kane, there's depth guys there. I don't understand the Devin Leary pick at 218. It's hard to give a pick in the 200s, especially anything other than a C pick, a C and higher, because it's either, you're getting a guy who they just saw as a top 200 player in the draft class. That, how different could guys ranked, 215 to 315 really and truly be? And I get that. I just don't like the fit. I don't like he doesn't fit into what they're doing over there. It's not the right decision to have that type of quarterback in your system when the entire offense is built around Lamar Jackson. You want to have quarterbacks that are basically poor man versions of Lamar so you can keep running your offense if Lamar's not there. And Devin Leary does not provide you with that. Here are the Buffalo Bills. They get a B grade. Keon Coleman filled a massive need for them. He was the right type of player. I just think that it's way early for him. I think that his contested catch win percentage is so low considering what his skill set is supposed to be. I think that's going to be something that could really hurt them. This is he's got this Kelvin Benjamin thing going on for him that just kept showing itself throughout the process. Cole Bishop, I think that's a good pick. Again, sort of in a weird range for him, but I think he could end up being a long-term starter down the line. Dwayne Carter, just, They definitely made up for it with the next 2 picks. Ray Davis, I think, will be a great number 2 running back behind James Cook. And Cedric Van Pran, that's potentially your starting center right there. He's going to compete with Connor McGovern. It's a great spot to have landed him. And then everyone else just seems to be, depth picks, special teams contributors and whatnot. So, overall, B draft, above average. Good job. And here are the Cincinnati Bengals. They get a B-. Their first 2 picks are A's. Amarius Mims, he's going to get a lot of work at some point in the season. Trent Brown's going to miss games for sure. Chris Jenkins is probably going to start next to B.J. Hill as your interior defensive lineman. I don't like Jermaine Burton's pick at all. It does fill a potential need there, depending on what you do with T. Higgins, but the off-field concerns for me are just, you can't ignore them. I think that's way early for Jermaine Burton based upon that. McKinley Jackson, I mean, you got a lot of interior defensive linemen. He's not somebody who's going to start. He's at best your interior defensive lineman, probably your 4th defensive tackle. So I don't know why you'd use that pick 97 on him. Eric All, okay, not the best pick. But then to go Tanner McLaughlin at 194 again, that's an F grade for me. Got to go different direction there. Tight end wasn't really something you guys necessarily needed unless it was going to be like Brock Bowers, which you missed out on. So like tight end kind of falls off the board for you, I would think, at that point. Josh Newton was a good pick. I think that was a good value for him. Then just getting special teams contributors there at the end and some more offensive line depth, is what it is. The Cleveland Browns also get a B-. The first 2 picks are Bs. Everything else is a C, so special team stuff, interior defensive lineman help again. Michael Hall is going to be a good part of that interior defensive line rotation that's really actually sort of under the radar stacked. Zach Zinter is going to be a good interior offensive lineman that they can work on and maybe move on from bigger contracts later. They got Wyatt Teller, they got Joel Bitonio in there, so maybe in a year after they'll feel a little bit more comfortable letting one of those guys go to let Zach Zinter fill that spot. But a team with not a lot of needs, so they weren't really in a position to be landing starters really at this point because they're just got a really great roster. So to have a B-, that's about as good as you probably could have expected. The Denver Broncos, they get an A- for me. To get Bo Nix at 12, that was my quarterback 3, and he was the 6th quarterback off the board. It's a home run. It really is. And then to add Troy Franklin at 102, who was projected to be a top 40, top 50 pick at worst in this draft by a lot of people, to get him at 102, that's an A as well, especially because you're pairing him with Bo Nix. It's somebody Bo Nix is instantly connected with. So that's really going to help the passing game, I think, early on. Chris Abrams-Drain at 145. I think that's a steal as well. I like Jonah Ellis at 76. Could they have done a little bit better? Maybe, but that seemed to be the perfect range for a guy like Jonah Ellis. You get a B grade for that. And then, some more offensive weapons, adding to the depth of the offense with Estime and Veli. Veli's probably just at best going to get special teams work. And Garguillo as an interior offensive line depth there, just to throw him out there on the offensive line as some depth pieces. I think Sean Payton really did a great job here getting guys that he's going to know how to use effectively, especially between Bo Nix and Troy Franklin. Here are the Houston Texans, and they get a B- from me. Kamari Lassiter was an A. It's a great pick. That should be your starter next to Derek Stingley for the next decade. Blake Fisher, I like the pick. It's going to be interesting to see how they find him because he solely is a right tackle. What's going on with Titus Howard, and I like Kalen Bullock coming in. That's a B. He could be a guy who could be a starter. Maybe not this year, next year, year after that maybe. Cade Stover's a really great number 2 tight end. They really liked using multiple tight ends throughout the season. So to pair him up with the tight end they have right now, what's his name? I always forget his name. Dalton Schultz is fantastic. I don't like the Jamal Hill pick at 188. I thought that was a huge reach at a position they were already really stacked at. And then, just adding depth there at the end. Nothing to really complain about. Here are the Indianapolis Colts, and they get a B-. Liatu Latu wasn't the best edge player on the board, but did fill a need I thought that they had. Adonai Mitchell at 52. That's a home run A pick. I like Matt Goncalves to come in, be that third tackle. Maybe take over for Braden Smith a couple years down the line. Tanner Bortolini. I think him, and if Goncalves can play guard, I think you got Bortolini and Goncalves really competing for that starting guard position potentially on this team to finish out, filling out that offensive line. Anthony Gold, I don't understand that pick. That got a D for me. And then everyone else, taking some swings in the secondary, adding depth to a secondary that was very depleted, that they didn't really get a chance to address. So maybe they find a diamond in the rough there. And then some more defensive line depth with Laulu. So they got Latu and Laulu to play on the defensive line. It's almost like it's a rib. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they get a C grade for me. The only pick of theirs I really liked was Brian Thomas Jr. That gets an A, and the only reason it gets an A is because they traded down. Had they stayed at 17 and taken him, I probably would have given it a B, just because he is a little redundant with what they got in Gabe Davis. So it'll be interesting to see how they work him out, but he was wide receiver 4 in this class, so to trade down and to get him, I think was a good play for them. Mason Smith, don't really love it at 48. He didn't really gain all that much favor. Jordan Jefferson, gets a C just because he went to LSU also, so they're pairing up him and Mason Smith together. It seems like the Cons went to a lot of LSU games this past season. Jerry and Foster at 96. Jerry and Jones, don't love it. That gets a D. Thought they could have done so much better, especially with what was happening at 48. Some of those corners that were available, if you're sitting there at 40, like, trade up. Get Cooper DeJean. If you walked out with Brian Thomas and Cooper DeJean, that changes everything for this draft class for them. Kellen Robinson, just 167. They took a guy who at best is running back 4. He's not going to beat out the guys that you have. It's not like you took a player like Jonathan Brooks or Blake Corum or Trey Benson who could legitimately be a high-end running back 2 for you. This guy, Kellen Robinson, he's going to be a running back 4. Like, it's maybe running back 3, maybe at best. So, just was, I think, a bit of a waste of a pick. The Kansas City Chiefs get a B+. They started the draft exactly the way they should have. Xavier Worthy, Kingsley Suamatia, both get A's. You got your starting left tackle there. You got a starting wide receiver for long term. Jared Wiley, okay, don't really love it. I don't think he's really the heir apparent to Travis Kelce. I like Jaden Hicks and Hunter Norzad just based upon their value. They got them way later than they probably should have. Kamal Hayden, CJ Hansen, they're just depth pieces. So overall, just a B+ grade for the Kansas City Chiefs. The Vegas Raiders, they get a B for me. Their best picks were Jackson Powers Johnson and Tommy Eichenberg. They got a starting linebacker there. They kept Andre James. So is Jackson Powers Johnson going to play guard opposite Dylan Parham? I don't know how they're really going to work that out because his best position is center, and so is the guy that you got. Brock Bowers gets a B just because he was the best player on the board, and that seemed to be the direction they were going, especially with their first 2 picks. So can't fault them for it, but can't really necessarily reward them. I feel like they probably, with Michael Mayer already on the roster and all this guy, I just don't. I mean, I guess you're going to be running a lot of 12 personnel this season. Delmar Glaze, terrible. Absolutely god-awful pick. That gets a D. I almost gave it an F, but they did need a tackle, so that kind of saved it. The Cameron Richardson, he's going to be a depth player. Dylan Laub is going to be a depth player in that backfield that's really searching out a starter, so he's going to get a chance to compete there. Taylor, Devonshire, those are just depth pieces, special teams contributors. The LA Chargers, they get an A in this draft. Really only Kimani Vidal and Terheeb Still got less than a B grade for me. I think they could have just done better for both of those positions. They got Cam Hart, that's an A at 140. Brandon Rice at 225, that's an A. I gave a B to Cornelius Johnson just because of how familiar Jim Harbaugh is with him, so I think he'll be somebody who can be used very effectively. Justin Igbogbe from Alabama, they need interior defensive linemen. I think that was a good pick at 105 to go along with Junior Colson as linebacker. That's an A pick. Again, somebody that Harbaugh's coming in very familiar with, so I think he's going to be used to this maximum capacity and help out with the one thing that hurt the Chargers the most, which was that run defense, especially up the middle. Ladd McConkey, that's an A pick for me too. Great player. He complements the other receiving group really well. I think the future of Quentin Johnston, Brandon Rice, and Ladd McConkey, I think should really be considered for Justin Herbert as a real success. Joe Alt gets a B just because they're going to be converting him to right tackle. And converting a blue chip left tackle to anything other than that position could end up yielding some pretty negative results. We've seen guys make the transition easily that have been these great players, like Penei Sewell, for example. But then we've seen some high-end prospects not make a good transition to right tackle, like Evan Neal. So there is a lot of... It's still a great pick. That's why it gets a B. But I think, especially based upon what we saw in the workouts, him in that right tackle stance, he looked uncomfortable. He was slower. His feet were not as good. So there's going to be a transition period here for Joe Alt. You just hope that his athleticism and that his tremendous ability otherwise is going to just counteract that transition. It'll be nice and smooth. Maybe halfway into next season, it'll click for him. And then you just got another Penei Sewell situation. Up next is the Miami Dolphins. They get a B-. They got my real sleeper player there, Malik Washington, at 184. That gets an A. I like the Patrick Paul pick as well. That gets an A. That's your future starting left tackle. He's going to get some playing time with Teron Armstead with how unhealthy he is. The edge players. Let's go there. Chop Robinson gets a C. I don't get it. I know that Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb were both injured last season. Both got injured pretty late. Question marks on whether they'll be ready at the beginning of the year. But you got Shaq Barrett to fill in the spot for a starting edge. Why are you taking Chop Robinson? Where does he fit in here? Okay, if one of those edge players' careers are over, fine. But if they're not, then you've got now a first-round pick just sort of sitting there on the bench because he's not a better player than Bradley Chubb. He's not a better player than Jalen Phillips. Those are two great edge players. So I don't get where this fits. I don't get it. And I get it even less them going Muhammad Kamara at 158. That's why it gets a D. Muhammad Kamara, I probably would have given a B grade had they not taken Chop Robinson at 21. If he had been the edge player that they took, the only edge player that they took at 158, that would have been a B grade because I would have been like, that makes sense. He comes in, he's going to play opposite Shaq Barrett, and then as the star players come back into the lineup, eventually he'll settle in as probably a pretty good, edge 3 situational edge player throughout the season while you got those two other really great players that you invested highly in. So I don't get it. I think it was just a bad idea. They got Jalen Wright for obvious reasons, but he's running back 3 on this team. Again, is Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert just had a great season. Devon Achane just had a great season. You just took your running back 3 at 120. Again, if Jalen Wright went to any other team, that would have been a higher grade. It was a very frustrating draft for the Dolphins, and everyone's like, oh, well, those two players are injured, so let's just waste long-term investments for short-term success. It made no sense to me. Just made no sense. Here are the New England Patriots. They get a B+, and there was a very rare F grade in here, and we'll talk about it. It was Caden Wallace, the tackle out of Penn State, at 68. Yes, they needed a tackle, but oh my God, they took like a day 3 tackle at 68. Just horrific. They could have done so much better. They could have done it's just bad. Bad. I do like most of their other draft picks though. Drake May gets an A. He was the best. He was my quarterback 4. For him to be the third quarterback off the board, not that bad. Jalen Polk is a good receiver. I think he might have been a little high. That's why it gets the B, but they need playmakers. That's why I gave Javon Baker an A for him going 110. That was a little bit later than they probably could have gotten him. He was probably more of a top 100 player than falling out of that. Layden Robinson, I'm glad to see him go as high as he did. I was pretty high on him 2 years ago. He never really stepped up, though, so that concerns me that this could be not great. I like the Joe Milton pick at 193. I like it when teams take a raw, high-ceiling quarterback prospect early, but then take a quarterback later as sort of like a contingency plan, where it's like, we're going to develop 2 quarterbacks here and really see which one ends up being the best one. It's almost like RG3 and Kirk Cousins was before, but rather than taking a 4th round pick, they got Milton at 193. And Milton and Drake May sort of have the same issues at quarterback, which they really kind of do. So as you're developing Drake May, you're using a lot of the same strategies on Joe Milton to improve him as well. So I think it's a really good pairing they have there. And then Jaheim Bell at 231. tight end's not the biggest need for them, but you might have just gotten your tight end 2 at 231. He fell out of favor with a lot of people. He was at one point a really high end, viewed as a pretty high top 100 player, perhaps even tight end 2 in the draft behind Brock Bowers. So for them to get him at 231, if they can get him back on track, that might be a real steal. Here are the New York Jets, and boy, did they make me really glad that I put the money on them winning the Super Bowl this year at their, I think it was like plus 2,000 or something. But they got Olu Fashanu, who is coming into the year. He's going to be your third tackle. Tyron Smith gets hurt. He's plugging in at left. He's at least coming in and giving you a high-end pass blocking tackle. Malachi Corley, that gets an A as well. He fits in so well with the offensive weapons they already have. He's going to be that guy who's going to work underneath. He's going to be, quick screen game, help get the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands, manufacture touches, just a great player. He got the Deebo Samuel comparisons for a reason. Them landing Braylon Allen at 134, that gets a B for me as well, just because even though their running back room, they have bodies there, he's going to come in and be that bruiser. He's going to be that power runner to complement Breece Hall to really beat down the defenses at the end of games. I think he's really there's really a good spot for him on this roster. Jordan Travis has some potential. He's going to come be the quarterback 3 in there. And, who knows, that this might be Tommy DeVito, young quarterback 3 behind backup quarterback, Tyrod Taylor, Aaron Rodgers, he can learn something there. You're really restarting the clock on the heir apparent after getting rid of Zach Wilson, you had to make a decision on his 5th-year option coming up. Them going Isaiah Davis, I thought that was a bit of a waste when they took Braylon Allen earlier. To go 2 running backs in a draft is really a weird decision when you already got a surefire starter the way that they do. They took a player from the CFL, Quantez Stiggers, which sounds like I'm not allowed to say that, but it is what it is. Jalen Key, some depth there, some special teams contributors. So I can see Isaiah Davis being a special teams contributor. That's probably why they took him. But just overall, a good complementary draft class to what they've done in free agency this year. Up next, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they might have had the best draft out of everybody. They get an A+ for me. Their first 5 picks, they potentially landed 5 starters in their first 5 picks. They might have completely flipped the future of their offensive line. Getting Troy Fautanu, who's going to play left or right tackle, depending on what they want to do with Broderick Jones. Zach Frazier's going to be your starting center. Mason McCormick's going to be one of your guards, and then you figure out who the other guard is. Peyton Wilson's going to be your starting linebacker out there. Roman Wilson's going to be one of your starting wide receivers next to George Pickens now. Complement him with Calvin Austin. It's a great draft. It's a great draft. And then they just added some depth there at the end. Whatever. It's an A+ draft for Pittsburgh. This might go down as one of their best drafts in a long time. And a real franchise changer because they put so much focus on the offensive side of the ball and got guys who really could be significant contributors. And here are the Tennessee Titans, and we'll start. They get a B+. J.C. Latham, I don't love that pick at all. And they were talking about converting him to left tackle. I don't understand it. I don't know why you wouldn't take Olu Fashanu in that situation if you were looking for a left tackle. You took a right tackle who's probably might end up being just a guard at the next level, and you're going to try and convert him to left tackle. I don't love it. It was a position of need, so it gets a C. But I think it was just a bad decision on the player. I give T'Vondre Sweat an A. I thought, based upon the DWI, that he was going to significantly drop in this draft. Tennessee had enough confidence in him to take him 38. That says something, you hope, for the future of T'Vondre Sweat, who I thought could have been a first-round player before those issues happened. Cedric Gray, I think that's a great pick, too, at 106 especially. He could be your starting linebacker come week 1. Jarvis Brownless Jr., that's a B. I like that pick as well. Fills a good little spot there. And then I think they did a good job filling out the roster, so the special teams help there, some depth pieces. And there you have it. my grades for all 32 teams in the 2024 NFL Draft. Again, in the comment section below, leave who you think had the best draft, who had the worst draft, who was your biggest steal, and who's your biggest sleeper, who was the biggest reach, etc., etc. I want to hear all about it. Let's get talking. And that's it for mock draft season as well. The draft is now in the back window, mirror, whatever. It's in there, and I'm off to do my deep dive series, so you guys are going to have to watch out for that. Once the schedule gets released, we're really going to be able to start releasing videos, and that's going to be in like a week or two. So until then, enjoy the rest of the videos here on the channel. And again, please like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys real soon when we get into that deep dive series coming up all summer long.